Thank you for joining us. This is our webinar for procurement options to support energy reduction. My name is Lori Clark. I'm an air quality program manager here at the North Central Texas COG. I also serve as our Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities coordinator. We are thankful that you took time out of your morning to join us, learn a little bit more about energy efficiency. So just as a quick reminder, just in case there's anybody on the webinar today that is not familiar with us, but the North Central Texas COG serves as a regional planning agency. We cover the 16 counties that are highlighted there on the map in tan. We are really here to help coordinate and collaborate initiatives amongst all of our local governments. Somebody comes up with an idea, there's absolutely no need to start from scratch. Somebody else has probably already done something similar. So I kind of refer to us as the matchmakers. And so I'm trying to pair people up with peers, share best practices, things like that. Every county in the state belongs to a COG, or a regional agency, could be a regional planning council. So if you are from an organization that is not in one of the 16 counties highlighted there in tan, you can go to txregionalcouncil.org and find which regional planning agency you do belong to. This webinar is part of the work that we have been doing under our Regional Energy Manager project. We are wrapping up the second year of our work. I do have to give great credit and thank you to the State Energy Conservation Office. They have been kind enough to give financial support to our staff in getting a regional energy initiative started. This is our fourth webinar over the course of the past fiscal year. This particular initiative is really focused on energy efficiency, energy management. We have several web pages highlighted here where you can get a lot of resources. All of the webinar recordings will be available here, workshops, things like that. So we have conservenorthtexas.org, gosolartexas.org, which is more narrowly scoped on solar, and then dfwcleancities.org is related to transportation and alternative fuel vehicles, clean vehicles in particular. All of these sites have email signups. They might look a little different, but you can see an example there on the bottom. Email is one of the best ways for us to make sure everybody's in the loop on events that are coming up next. So if you don't already get these emails, please sign up. So then recapping, our last webinar was back in May, and we focused in that event on financing options for energy management and energy efficiency. And that included all of the items that you see here, the topics that you see here, including guaranteed energy savings performance contracting, which is actually procurement methodology, not really a financing option, but it encompasses some of the other things on this slide. So just a reminder, we do record all of the webinars. So if you were not at the last event and any of these topics sound interesting to you, or you would like a refresher from something that you've heard before, please go to conservenorthtexas.org and find the recording. I will flag that CECO's Lone Star program is currently open through, I believe, the end of August. So there's a link where you can go in and access that. So as I mentioned, all about energy efficiency and energy management, and many of the local governments in the state are required to report to the State Energy Conservation Office every year on how much electricity they have reduced. This past year, there were questions in that report related to what type of strategies are you currently pursuing. And so this graph, I know the legend is a bit difficult to read, but this graph kind of summarizes what some of those responses were. So you can see in the greens and blues what type of things people are already working on or have already completed. And in red and orange, things that people are not looking at or have not yet completed. And so a couple things that we noticed was here on the left-hand side, the third column in, is the CECO Lone Star financing. So again, just a reminder that that is available. And then the two additional bars over from the left, remote energy. And so this is an option, is a technical tool available from the State Energy Conservation Office. So we just want to remind everybody about these resources. CECO offers for free to local governments remote energy assessments, preliminary energy assessments, or technical assistance. They have contractors, engineering firms and others on contract to offer services at no cost to, in the case of a remote energy assessment, it's software-based, it's data analytics, a preliminary energy assessment, an engineering firm would come on site, walk through the facilities, look for ways that energy savings could be achieved, and then make recommendations, or technical assistance if there's something that is just being problematic. These are the forms that you submit to ask for that assistance. They're all one-page forms, just snapshots available from the CECO website, and there's a link to where you can go and get more information about these programs. We highly recommend that everybody take advantage of this free service. Consider it an extension of your staff. And why does this relate to procurement? And why am I talking about it during this webinar? Just an example of a recent report that was done for the City of Denton. In the preliminary energy assessment, there were recommendations on lighting and HVAC. All of these recommendations came with cost estimates, projected savings, and an estimated year to payback. So it gives the facility owner a very specific, actionable list of things that could be done to improve energy efficiency or energy management. So these might be items that we need to procure. And so today, we want to make sure that you understand how you might go about procuring those items that help you with efficiency. So we have actually four speakers today. Jen Sanders from several different organizations. She wears many hats. Jared McCrossan, Daniel Kinsey, and Craig Johnson. And they'll all be talking about different aspects to procurement. And so we'll get started here with Jen Sanders. She co-founded the Dallas Innovation Alliance in 2015. It's a 501 partnership dedicated to supporting Dallas smart city strategies. Based on the success there, she, in 2019, co-founded the North Texas Innovation Alliance, which she'll talk about more this morning, to scale the success from the Dallas Innovation Alliance up to the regional level. One of the things that they'll be focusing on is regional standards, policies, financial and procurement models to facilitate faster deployment and results. And with that, I will hand over to Jen.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for having me. I will say I've got a lot of content in here. We're going to run through a lot of it. I'm hoping will be a reference point when you guys receive the slides after the presentation. So just a quick introduction. As was mentioned, in 2015, we founded the Dallas Innovation Alliance, and that focus was really on, by looking at an independent 501c3 and pulling in best minds, how could we move quickly, get learnings, understand what makes sense to scale, and deliver that information, not just to Dallas, but cities around the country, so that these new technologies and services and efficiencies to residents and to government could be achieved. So we always knew that looking the next level was really about looking at regional strategies, and we'll talk about the importance of that, many of which you all are very aware of, but that was launched in November of 2019. So the mission of the NTIA is to create the most connected, smart, and resilient region in the country. And that encompasses a lot of different things. Connected, smart, and resilient all relate to energy conservation, looking at cross-boundary standardization, and really looking at boundaries throughout the region as very permeable, more so than other regions across the country. So how do we implement at scale? How do we have the level of consistency and interoperability necessary to reap the full benefits of these investments? So as of May, we have 22 official members. You'll see they include cities, counties, agencies, chambers of commerce, academic institutions, and our initial private sector partner is with MasterCard City Possible program that provides a great deal of resources, complementary and access to data for our members. And so when we think about smart cities, smart regions, that term is highly ubiquitous, even several years into its use within strategy. So we look at that as how do we find that intersection between technology, community, and data to create economic growth, resource efficiencies, and improved quality of life. So the structure, as mentioned, we're independent, we're a nonprofit, and we serve as a public-private partnership cross-sector. The vision is how do we utilize that structure to support a resilient and equitable future. And obviously in times like 2020, it's even more important to have that peer-to-peer sharing, to really looking at how do we respond quickly, get from reactive to proactive in the face of future situations where moving quickly is the penultimate goal. So looking at smart cities and smart regions, why a regional approach is critical. Again, these are all things that we think about every day. So those blurring geographic boundaries, more than 30% of residents in North Texas cross at least one county line every day, meaning that no matter whether I cross from Dallas to Collin County or whatnot, I don't really care about that. I just want services to work. I want traffic signals to work. I want lights to be on. I want emergency services to seamlessly find me if needed. The aging infrastructure, given the growth of the region, is critical, as well as depleted or strained natural resources. Looking at weather and health crises, the workforce pipeline and upskilling is a highly stated need, and that's certainly an opportunity for economic mobility as well. We have that population inflow, and a big piece of procurement, obviously, whether really any type of infrastructure or systems, is the challenges with implementation, and also procurement being part of that. And so just a quick bit about how the consortium is structured. It's obvious it's overseen by a leadership council, voting on strategy, voting on projects that are going to move forward, and having that general oversight. The three functions that we really talk about as the value props of this entity. One is strategic advisory committees, which is really meant to be think tanks on the bigger, meatier issues that really take a lot of expertise, looking more policy driven. And that is things like procurement, that is things like setting standards, cybersecurity, and various elements like that. The strategic opportunity teams are really, those are the teams that are going to implement and deploy. So once strategic priorities as a region are identified and projects are put in place and in the pipeline, these are the teams that really are going to manage that deployment. And the third piece is this workshops and training. So one of the highest needs expressed by our members is, in some cases, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what to set as our parameters in RFPs, as an example. We want to make sure our staff is efficiently caught up and cut lots of months of staff time on that education piece on different solutions. And so that's a core piece as well. And so when we think about the benefits, speaking about the nonprofit P3 allows us to expedite particularly pilot programs, get those learnings and solutions. With the DIA, we were able to operate for the public good in the right of way without going through procurement, so we could get those kind of speed to market solutions. And as a result, our Smart Cities Living Lab, which is fully integrated 10 project pilot, was the fastest to market smart cities initiative in the country. We went from, and the cities and public sector on the line will recognize how different this is. We went from use case to launching with projects in the ground in 10 months. And other cities have talked about how that process would probably take 3 years. So the goal is really, how can we be on top of that technology to solve these core problems? Looking together as an active voice to advocate for regional standards and best practices. One of the biggest pieces is access to a central portal and repository of regional initiatives. So again, this is really about how do we capture projects that are in motion, in planning, already done by cities across the region, so that there's a lot of time saved, again, for other cities looking to deploy these projects. One thing that cities, and really, anyone, I have never heard talking to them is, I have too much money and too many people. I have no idea what to do with it. And so what we really want to do is, how do we shave, obviously, financial resources, but also staff resources to free them up. So in terms of procurement, when we talk about whether it's piggybacking or other pieces, or simply how do we write them, what I've been told is typically that's at least half of a full-time employee for a comprehensive RFP. And if we add that up and those resources saved through some of these expedited processes, that provides a lot as cities are doing more with less. And then looking at how do we leverage and negotiate partner licenses, SME resources, and obviously looking to leverage those that exist through organizations like the COG and otherwise. So in terms of the target outcomes, so priorities, have spoken to. I can move quickly through this. We want to do the strategic planning. We want the actionable inventory of projects, start these workshops and sessions. We really look at economic development as a core outcome of United Innovation. So part of this is, how do we show the country that DFW is not just J.R. Ewing, Dallas Cowboys, oil and gas, and things that really around the world are still often the first things that people think of. And we know that there is so much going on beyond that and still have that spirit of innovation. So that obviously can help drive attention from relocation and various other elements of driving tax base. So the key stakeholder groups, again, that make up the NTIA, one being residents, citizen engagement and education is a big piece of this to have that advocacy. Cities, obviously, looking at the region overall, and then industry. So private sector is a core piece of this consortium as well in bringing best practices. Y'all have tested and tried and have these case studies and these results from around the world. We don't want to start from scratch. We want to be able to utilize that expertise and really learn, understand as we approach these problems. And so bringing that to the table alongside universities and that research component is just a critical piece. And so just looking at each of those quickly. So for residents, we're saving taxpayer dollars, improving the user experience as services are delivered, and then modern services and solutions. So obviously, as a resident, we all have gotten to this instant gratification place in terms of, why don't I have this now? Why does it take so long to fill out permits, to report lighting outages, and on and on? So how do governments catch up with that expectation to better serve residents? For cities, similarly, we're looking at cost and operational efficiencies. Organic opportunities for cross-jurisdictional innovation also speaks to setting those standards, having that cross-border consistency, and looking at collective purchasing and other pieces there. An organization like this, as a neutral organization, provides an honest, unbiased evaluation. So we come in, we can help evaluate what we know and have heard from other cities, other regions, and really provide, again, some neutral context on the technologies, on some of the solutions and products specifically as we pursue these solutions. It's a protected peer-to-peer space, similar, and there's a lot of entities that do this. Part of the unique nature of this entity is that we have lots of different roles within cities looking at the integrated nature of this concept of smart region, that you can really find those synergies and connection points in a method. The hope is this really provides a collaborative, integrated function and environment on these issues. And then again, the needs-driven education. So to industry, looking at, if we can streamline procurement and standards in service delivery, obviously that saves time on both sides of the coin. Fewer meetings and upfront insights. So, in terms of, getting in front of, 25 or 30 cities at once to educate on a product saves cities a lot of time and also the private sector. So how do we streamline that? And again, taking a regional lens for partnerships and CSR. Regionally, we can be a dedicated shepherd in applying for federal grants. Federal agencies, as many of you know, really look kindly on regional applications as opposed to individual cities. So we can help to collate that and do those convenings and coordinate that. The regional innovation leadership as a neutral convener, evaluating new solutions, which again saves cities time to have a dedicated kind of centralized resource in us. And then again, we're trying to scale people and skill folks up so they can free up more time for other functions within their role. So procurement vision and best practices, there's a lot of concepts here that already exist, and our thought is, how can we look on potentially taking them further? How can we look at applying them in ways that have not yet been addressed? But so some of these are not going to be new to you all, but we're looking at a bit of a different approach. One of the biggest pieces in efficiency and procurement that we're trying to help with is, one of those is the central inventory, to make it really, really easy to understand what's already been done, and also what's being worked on. So when I think about all of the strategic plans that a lot of cities are undertaking or recently have, I think that's a great place to find synergies in terms of, if the climate action plan in Dallas, for example, has some core priorities around circular economy and energy efficiency and CO2 reduction, and we find that 3 other cities have developed similar plans and are in the process of the go forward, how then can those cities work together for, whether it's a larger RFP, whether it's looking at standards and learnings, and whatnot, sometimes just making it that much easier with staff extremely strapped is a piece. And then you have those intervention points along the process where you can have those connection pieces. Also, things like speeding up MOUs, and I'll go here and then potentially go back. So if we look at, the starting place of working together, obviously those are done already, but my half joke, half not, I don't know if there's any attorneys on the line, but lock up the lawyers is the tagline I've used. And so, if cities can kind of, provide the bandwidth or mandate that, a bunch of different city attorneys sit in a room and can take a whole day and say, okay, we're going to come up with standardized language that we're all comfortable with and get 80% of the way there, and that's done, you can cut years out of those MOUs. In some cases, San Antonio has done this to an extent. They have a three-way data sharing agreement and standard agreement between the school district, the city, and Bexar County, and actually I believe the River Authority as well. And that process is incredible, and it's great to utilize, but it took 2 to 2.5 years. So again, if we can find an upfront way to streamline that, we get to the procurement piece much faster. And so utilizing existing repositories, again, of existing piggybacks, but also looking pre-planning, as mentioned before, I think is a big piece. And explore, evolving P3 opportunities, some of which we've known about a long time, or certainly in the last several years around infrastructure and lighting and infrastructure ownership, but really not a ton have been fully executed to this point. So how do we look at how we get to that place, particularly as it relates to a portfolio approach? So again, how do we integrate efficiencies into revenue drivers that can fund an entire portfolio of comprehensive solutions? So I want to talk for a few minutes about peer illustrations and examples that we've seen. So one, I don't know that they're talking publicly, so ambiguously, there's a cluster of 5 cities that went ahead and did that streamlined LOA and took the time and the energy of creating that in a contracting process. So they're taking kind of the full consulting infrastructure assessment and feasibility, but put language into that LOA so that it really sets them up to very quickly look at the purchasing and the implementation and deployment of those findings. And again, those would include not just financial and speed, but also would obviously be the same standards, the same process, and really be able to implement the region. And there's other big cities that are already speaking with them to say, how do we, leverage this and utilize it? So it's just an example of when we're looking at templates, right? It doesn't have to be big city to big city, and I think that sometimes is a misperception there. So translating collaborative purchasing successes, speaking to some procurement, career procurement folks, they've said that the most frequently used are transportation related. So how do we translate that where necessary or directly apply when perhaps looking completely cross industry or department has not been fully leveraged to this point? The California RFI2, I'm not sure if anyone here is aware of that, but this was put in place by the governor by executive order about a year ago, and it's essentially RFI for innovative ideas. It outlines the problem to solve rather than the technology, and looks to drive that quickly. And then any accepted idea from proposal, not even necessarily what was contracted, can then be utilized by any entity throughout the state. So the first 2 contracts were awarded just 8 months after its launch, went through the whole RFI, went through the contracting, and got going. So that's something that as they move further down the line, it'll be really interesting to see how that works. There's my timer, I have 2 minutes. And the other piece, that California is doing, or forgive me, Aurora. So Aurora, Illinois has done a lot of great work recently in developing this kind of integrated innovation piece, and that includes buying and procurement. There is a company called marketplace.city that is free for public entities, and really it's that repository nationally. So not just looking at what products have other cities used, but also has, in one click on the same portal, the RFP, the contract itself, any LOAs that had to be implemented, and looking, all down the line, and that's saved Aurora a great deal of time in other cities that are more and more frequently utilizing that platform. So there's all kinds of pieces to this, but those are some of the things that we're thinking through as we look to the top, let's say, 5 problem statements that the region wants to focus on in the next 12 to 18 months. And so with that, I will stop here, and I'm certainly open to future discussions if anyone wants to speak individually or at greater length or detail, and just appreciate y'all's time.
Thank you, Jen. I will introduce our next speakers, Jared McCrossan and Daniel Kinsey. So Jared is the Data Management, Analytics, and Technology Manager at the Texas Comptroller Statewide Procurement Division. His teams manage the state's e-commerce platform, which is Texas SmartBuy, and other statewide procurement systems. And he currently represents Texas on the NASPO Value Point Purchasing Cooperative Board of Managers. He previously was at Austin Energy's Communications Department and as a certified Texas contract developer and contract manager. And then Daniel is a term contract development team lead in the Comptroller's statewide procurement division, who oversees complex procurements, including state fleet and financial contracts. He previously worked for TxDOT, responsible for specs and procurement of equipment, fleet, and aviation. He has also served in local government as Guadalupe County Emergency Manager and in private industry, and is also a certified Texas contract development and contract manager. So as I'm, a lot of people are familiar with each GAC buy and buy board. Personally, us at COG, we were not so familiar with Texas SmartBuy and what's available through the Comptroller's office. So hoping that this is very informative for everybody. Jared and Daniel, I'll turn it over to y'all.
Good morning. This is Jared McCrossan. I'm very happy to be with you all this morning. So this is an opportunity to do what I actually really like to do a lot, which is kind of talk up what we do. And Jen's talk this morning, we did not communicate beforehand, but it was a great lead into some of the savings in terms of time and resources that hopefully your organizations in some way are already using and perhaps can use further by looking at the contracts that are on offer. Both from the statewide procurement division at the Comptroller's office and also other entities. You'll see kind of a pattern of logos that are scattered around. We are probably well known or best known for operating the Texas SmartBuy system. We have a lot of contracts through our TexMass program that I'll talk a little bit later. But our office is also responsible for the state's historically underutilized business program. We provide the list of vendors that register interest to do business through the centralized master bidder list. Statutorily, we also operate the vendor performance tracking system. So as you are awarding contracts or looking for vendors and maybe are looking for feedback on if they've done work in the past for the state, that publicly viewable vendor performance tracking system is available. And then we also encourage local governments to post their solicitations on the electronic state business daily. Again, that's the ESBD on the bottom right. That's also statutory. And so move on. We are, as I said, we're the central authority for state procurement. The statewide procurement division was moved to the Comptroller's office in 2007, having previously been part of Texas Building Procurement Commission. And in 2007, the procurement function was moved across to the Comptroller's office, and Texas Facilities Commission was established to retain the building function and construction side of things. Our responsibility is in the area of non-IT commodities and services, and I'll mention a little bit later the technology side, which I know is a lot of your procurement is in the realm of Texas Department of Information Services, DIR. Right now, we have on typically at any given time, we run around 600 to 700 active contracts. They are composed of the Texas SmartBuy or term contracts that we put together. Those Texas SmartBuy, that is our e-commerce platform. The original Texas SmartBuy was launched in 2009. Our current system dates to 2014, and we're working on generation 3 of that system right now. It may be billed or at times thought of as kind of to use the biggest one in the country, Amazon for Texas government. It's probably not quite that, but it is that general idea. You can, and I'll show a little bit, you can search our contracts. You can search we have around about 1.7 million items that you can issue purchase orders against through that system right now. We also have what are called our TexMAS or Texas Multiple Award Schedules contracts, which historically were based on General Services Administration contracts. And in the last 5 years, we've actually expanded our footprint, and a lot of the base contracts that we use to establish those are now coming from other states or purchasing cooperatives or individual government entities. We have a portfolio called our managed contracts, which are mostly services-based contracts. And then finally, we also operate the contracts for the state use program, WorkQuest, which used to be the Texas Industries for Blind and Handicapped, TIBH, and also Texas Correctional Industries, and those operate through our systems as well. So how do local governments access statewide contracts? You may have heard, or in the past, you may have heard something called the co-op, and we rebranded what was known as our co-op program several years ago. It was originally established in governments to be able to access the statewide contract portfolio, and we rebranded it to be more alongside Texas Smart Buy, because that's what you're accessing. So we call it the Texas Smart Buy membership program, and we have an outreach team that goes out to many of the events that your purchasing staff and the leaders in your organizations will attend, and hopefully you too, where we kind of talk and explain more about what the program is, how you access it. There's a $100 a year fee, and that lets local governments access those contracts. You become Texas Smart Buy members, and you have login access and privileges into our e-commerce platform. That allows leveraging of statewide contracts. That streamlines the procurement process. So if you're looking for on Texas Smart Buy and you're an active Texas Smart Buy member, your purchasing office can issue a purchase order direct to the vendor through off of that contract without having to go through the bidding process or the competitive procurement process yourself. I took a look at it. We have right now, we run on average around about 1,600 or 1,700 members on Texas Smart Buy. Looking at the data this year, so far in fiscal 2020, about 11 used SPD contracts. They spent $65.3 million across 161 of those contracts. And kind of other kind of high points of what that membership offers. It allows you to know that state level best value has been achieved, because that's when you think about sustainability. And I was thinking about this last night and kind of reading just a little bit on the concept of sustainable purchasing. And with the contracts that we put together, and Daniel can maybe talk about this a little bit with regards to fleet, we are not looking at always trying to find what is the lowest price at the time of purchase. We look at the life cycle. Statute allows us to do that. There are about 15 different points in the government code that form the elements of best value. And so best value purchasing over the life cycle of a product and a commodity is one of the things that we look for when we're awarding contracts. As I mentioned, you get access to the TexMAS contracts. We do not have a fee on the purchase orders that your buyers are issued. Once that $100 membership is paid on the local governments, there is no additional cost. You can issue a purchase order for $5 or $5 million. There is not a spend threshold to get that best value on those contracts. And there's also access to things like our fuel card systems, where fuel card contracts, our travel contracts, rental cars, and hotel air, things like that are across the board in services that are required by government. So I wanted to I took a quick snapshot. One of the teams that works with me is our data analytics team, and the slide is probably a little bit small, but they track the expenditures that occur, and we looked at what the spending was, and I mentioned $65 million so far in fiscal 2020. On the North Texas area, we mapped. So as you can see from the dots on there, each of those dots represents a local government that is a Texas Smart Buy member in the North Texas area. You know your lakes up there better than I do, but I just hovered over the city of Cedar Hill. I don't know if anyone's on from there today, but they've spent $96,000 this fiscal year so far. The big spend areas, just looking in the current fiscal year, are in the areas of records management, also our MRO contracts, maintenance, repair and operations. We have several big vendors and that contract is a TexMAS contract. We actually streamlined our purchasing process, and we're leveraging best value on a national level for that, because that's through our partnership with Nashville Value Point Purchasing Cooperative that we're able to get a Texas contract in place as well. And then the third one there that we see is the fleet contract, as Daniel will talk about in a couple of minutes. TexasSmartBuy.com offers a couple of different ways of navigating, and we're not going to spend a lot of time just on that today, but just at a very high level, if you go to the website, there's a search bar at the top where you can just do item level search, and then you can also browse the contracts or search for particular types of contracts through the system. If you've when you get the slide deck after here, if you have or looking for additional information, I've linked emails to our contract managers, also to Texas Smart Buy support, so that you can take a look at that on your own time later. Just a few kind of example contracts. I know this is a sustainability group, and so I just spent a little bit of time looking at our contracts and also looking at the survey from the chart that was shown at the beginning of the presentation here today. The TexMass contracts that we have form about half of our contract portfolio, and as I mentioned, our MRO contract came from Massive Value Point. Several of the contracts that we have linked here for indoor and outdoor lighting fixtures, for example, I know that's an area of interest in local government, facilities maintenance and management, and then also electric vehicles like the type in the picture. We have one of those little trucks that actually are statewide mail, which is part of our operation. Runs, and I was talking with the manager of that section and just asked him. He got it about 7 or 8 months ago, and you know, the convenient thing for that is it allows them to move around and navigate around the capital area, do short runs through that capital complex, and offer a little bit more safety, and also have some carrying capacity for them without running a full vehicle. And then they plug it into a 110 outlet when it comes to charge each night. And then on the term contract side, which are contracts that we competitively solicit by our own staff, we have I think utility invoice processing is one of the ones that was one of the feature areas that I think in terms of looking to gather efficiency in operations. We have a contract, the 958 M2 contract in place. NG is the vendor on that one. That was recently, I think, were re-awarded last year, and that one's heavily used by the Department of Transportation, Parks and Wildlife Department, and I think Department of Criminal Justice, where they have a lot of meters that are using multiple different vendors in the state to provide electricity around the different regions and geographic areas. So since we are not a monolithic at the local electric service area in a lot of areas of the state, I think that's a contract that's been very useful, and if that's something that's of interest, we've linked that contract there. And then probably one of the biggest contracts that we do for the state is the fleet and automobile contracts, and I'm going to hand over to Daniel, who actually runs those contracts for us.
Jared touched on the fact that our solicitations are competitively bid, which is a grant requirement. We are just now in the final stages of approving a contract for transit buses, which will be available with CNG and LPG fueling options. But the big thing about our solicitation is grant compliant. So I know that a lot of the transit authorities use FTA funds to buy their buses. So I can't speak to the other contracts where you may be able to buy those, but I know that many of the municipalities were having to go out of state to find a contract that was grant compliant. So that is something else that our contracts offer. But as far as the fleet contract, we cover basically everything from a 10-yard dump truck down to a very small mini subcompact vehicle. There are a lot of changes going on right now in the fleet industry. This year, or for fiscal year 2021, Ford will offer no automobiles other than the Ford Mustang. They are going trucks and SUVs only. Chrysler is not quite headed that way, and Chevrolet still has several passenger cars, but Ford is going to be the Mustang only. Next year, 2021, both Dodge and Ford will offer a hybrid vehicle in their half-ton truck, and we are trying to incorporate all of those into the contract. We're actually doing a big revamp on our contract to make sure that we're capturing all the hybrids that are available. As Jared was talking earlier, we kind of look at Smart Buy as the Amazon for the state. Don't have quite as much money as Bezos, but we do a pretty good job. You can see right now there's 10 different hybrids available. The contract is kind of divided up into trucks and people movers being anything that isn't a truck. Next slide. We're moving, because of the rapid change in the industry, we're moving from a 2-year contract to a 1-year contract, just because of the changes in the industry. And the way that when we competitively award, we can award up to 7 vehicles per series. So there could be 7 awards for half-ton trucks, for instance. So that would be like 2 Ford, 2 Dodge, 2 Chevrolet, and then 1 of something else. So it could be two Toyota, 2 Hyundai, 2 Nissan, and 1 domestic. It's just wherever the prices fall, but no more than 2 per manufacturer, but 7 awards total. Which allows you some flexibility to choose. If you have and I'm just going to pick a brand, I'm not showing any preference, but if you have a Chevrolet shop and all your tools are geared for Chevrolet, your mechanics are trained on Chevrolet, and the price difference is negligible, and you decide it's best value for you not to have to retrain your staff, then you can still buy a Chevrolet even if something else is cheaper. You would just, we tell our state agencies you have to document your purchasing file is why you chose the unit that was not the lowest cost. We have also changed the way that our solicitation is structured, which forces the vendors to bid more of the options. So there's a higher chance that you can just go online, and as long as you know what you want, you can buy it without any back and forth on negotiations or quote options. We do offer a quote option in the event that we have not listed something that you want. If you have a special need, a certain tank size for an LPG conversion, or a special toolbox for something for a 3/4 ton truck, we do have the ability to include that in your PO so that you don't have 2 POs to deal with. And as I said, many of the manufacturers, in fact, I was talking with Chrysler this morning, they are what they call electrifying their fleet. And I anticipate within the next 10 years, every vehicle from every manufacturer will have a hybrid option, with perhaps the exception being the heavy off-road type vehicles. Next slide.
So I think that moves us we're kind of running toward the end of our time here. Thank you, Daniel. As mentioned earlier on, there are other purchasing options because the way that our state procurement is structured, we're quite a decentralized operation. So as I mentioned, the non-IT commodities and services, which is still a broad area, does fall under the comptroller's office. When it comes to IT commodities and services contracts, the Texas Department of Information Resources is your primary source for obtaining those contracts, and that covers IT hardware, software, and also telecom. As the state of Texas, we are a member of what's called the NASPO Value Point Multi-State Purchasing Cooperative, and these are structured in such a way where the contracts are competitively bid by one lead state, and other state members will participate on purchasing teams as part of the development process so that they're suitable for more than one state. I've linked the Value Point site there if you want to take a look at the contracts that are on there. Daniel and I are both currently serving on sourcing teams for Value Point with contracts. Daniel's working on one with the state of Michigan is leading. I'm working on one that the state of Utah is leading, and we'll be part of that evaluation process. And the advantage for us doing that is that instead of having one state that is or having our state staff working on a contract that is also being worked on by a similar state, and for the vendors the same thing, they bid on the one solicitation, and then the other states have access to it. There's quite a number of local governments in the state of Texas, particularly in the North Texas area, that have come to statewide procurement and asked us if they can participate in NASPO contracts that Texas hasn't executed a statewide PA on. And if it's something that we're not doing, our state chief procurement officer provides the authorization, and those local governments have the opportunity to participate directly on that. this is a pretty short period of time today. If anyone's got an interest and wants to talk further about any of those alternative purchasing methods, or indeed, I'm happy to have an offline conversation. Our contact information is here. And we do appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. I think one of the things that really stuck out to me about Jared and Daniel's presentation is the fact that they are making decisions based on total cost over the life of an item, and not simply initial price, which is a very important thing to consider whenever we're talking about energy efficiency, energy management. So that is great to hear, and also, of course, the grant compliance. And then our last presenter for this morning is Cragen Johnson. He is the purchasing supervisor for NTIA and the SHARE Cooperative Purchasing Program, which is right here at our offices. He and his team strive to simplify the procurement process for public sector agencies and help find access to the best products or services available today. So I will hand it over to Cragen.
Thank you, Lori, and good morning, everyone. I would like to extend my gratitude for you all allowing me to speak to you today. And I would just like to take a few minutes of your day to tell you about the SHARE program and the co-op that's offered by the North Central Texas Council of Governments. As you can see, and as you've heard, we originally were stood up to assist with the 16-county region of North Central Texas. And quite often, members and derivatives of these groups would come to us and they'd expound upon a particular problem that they may have, or a need that they expressed but did not exactly know what that looked like. So focus groups would be put together at the COG to research this initiative and to come up with the best solution for it. And this has been the modus operandi for the COG for years on years. And what ended up happening was, once a solution was put in place, we would get approached by neighboring communities, Waco, parts of Oklahoma. They'd say, I see that you did this initiative. I would love to jump on board with that, but I don't know if I can. And for the longest time, the answer was no, it's only for the NTIA participating organizations. And then about 2012 was when we first started experimenting with shared solutions initiatives, interlocal agreements, and extending these offers to other people. And since then, we've discovered that, you know what, if this particular problem affects the Dallas-Fort Worth region, the NTIA region, chances are it affects other public sector agencies and not-for-profits without the United States as a whole. So in 2015, we stood up a Share Purchasing Cooperative Program with the explicit purpose of sharing unique initiatives and solutions with other public sector agencies. And quite frankly, a big thing that sets us apart is that we are a public sector solution by public sector purchasing agents. So there is no cost to join. There's never a membership. It's purely a collaborative effort to help out, especially today with how comprehensive and convoluted the procurement process has become. It can be months from your initial recognition of a problem to when you actually have a service or solution in place. And we want to alleviate that as best as possible. So we extend this to no cost to any public sector or nonprofit agent. The only way to join is you just need to hold an ILA with the North Central Texas Council of Governments. On this page, I have included links to the interlocal agreement as well as the SHARE website. Of course, if you'd ever love to call or email us, we'll talk you through those and provide you those documents as well. The big benefit with our interlocal agreement is that it's an evergreen document. Once it's signed in perpetuity. So say if the city of Glenbrook signs with us today, 100 years from now, if the program is still active, they have access to every single contract on the page, present and future. This is a big effort that we try to just reduce the administrative effort that public purchasing has become. Now, traditionally, we ourselves only started off based on inquiries that were brought to us. We had to wait for a city, wait for a county, wait for somebody to come to us and say, here's the problem that we need fixing. Will you help us build a contract? So in the beginning, we didn't have a whole large offering of contracts to be put out at the same time. We were approached by, at the time, the National Joint Powers Association, or NJPA, and they were helping to establish their foothold in the southern region, in the Southwest. And they approached us and said, would you be interested in going into an associated partnership with ourselves? They are now Sourcewell, and they are an associated partner of ours. Through them, we do have a handful of green project initiatives, and those include electronic vehicles, electronic vehicle supply equipment, compressed natural gas vehicles and equipment, propane auto gas vehicles and equipment, and of course, alternative energy solutions. Those have been utilized heavily by members of this group. I want to say the Fleets for the Future initiative 2 or 3 years ago was spearheaded with their help. And then, of course, they also have recently put out a new alternative energy production system. I want to say that's generators and off-grid electronics manufacturing or production, though I'm not particularly familiar with that one. At the same time, we do have a few associated contracts that could be beneficial to any sort of carbon neutral green initiatives that are with our own system, but they're more so of alleviating the standard work balance, and then that's why you capture your carbon neutral credits there. The real benefit that SHARE offers to the public sector agencies is that we actually will create cooperative solutions for you. For instance, I've spoken with many public sector procurement agents, and they've all said, well, I have to go shop a contract. I have to shop the co-ops to see if I can find something that's suitable enough for what I'm trying to do. Well, I can't find one. I guess we're going to have to do the procurement. This is a big point where we actually like to stand in. We have separate purchasing staff that are not managing the day-to-day operations of a city. And they are standing by, ready to hear about individual needs from cities and communities that they can assist with. The real point to that is a city may say, I wish that I had a contract that allowed me to purchase photovoltaic arrays, but I just can't seem to find one. They can approach us and say, well, here's the exact spec that I need. I know this exists for the Bosch product, but I really wish I could get it for Tech Lumens or Tesla. And I wish that I could spec it out in this way. I need this type of inverters. I need this type of this. And these other contracts just don't simply meet that. We will take their specifications and develop an RFP for them that they will then be able to review, they be able to acknowledge. We'll also share that with other potential public sector communities within the region and say, is this something you'd be interested in? And if so, would you like to add to the scope? We will then, on our own, publish that RFP, receive the proposals, and have a scoring committee comprised of public sector subject matter experts to weigh it. The resultant contract or contracts will be hosted on the SHARE website for the benefit of every public sector agency in the country who wants to use it. We just completed this for, I want to say, the city of Dallas for an electronic invoicing solution. We also just did one of these for the Workforce Solutions in North Central Texas to get a career pathways platform, I guess, a software system put in place that was being utilized by both the states of California and New York, but was not cooperatively available. We've done this as well with the city of Dallas and the city of Fort Worth for specialized products. One we did just a couple of months ago was for the city of Fort Worth to receive on-site fire truck repair and maintenance. Traditionally, there are 44 substations throughout the city of Fort Worth that the firefighters all have to take this truck to a single location. It's known as the Joint Area Service Center, and they would have to deadline that truck for 6 to 8 hours just for something as simple as a fluid change. And now they have two contracted vendors that can come onto their substations and perform the work right there in the bay. That keeps the fire staff fully trained, fully up, ready to respond, and the downtime for the city of Fort Worth is significantly reduced. So these are all just various solutions we've put in place, but in this regard, this is something that we don't really have a footprint in, but would love to assist any burgeoning community who wants to get into green initiatives, who wants to get into alternative fuels, but isn't quite sure of how to do so, or does not have the procurement staff to dedicate specifically to such a project. We would like to step in and lend a hand. So as you see here on this slide, these are just kind of references to some of the things that we can do, but the biggest thing that we can do is give your time back to you. If you don't have a purchasing agent that you can dedicate 3 or 4 months to chase after a particular RFP, please get in touch with us, and we'd like to take that time off your hands. And then naturally, the last slide that I have is a means to get in touch with us. We have got our email address. We've got the phone number to Miss Cassandra Perdue, who's always ready and willing to stand by to answer any questions that you may have, as well as links to our website. I know I've said quite a bit. It may have gone over a few people's heads, but the ultimate idea behind this is you could look at us as a outsourced procurement solution. We are ourselves public purchasing agents, and we are willing to work with any public or nonprofit purchasing needs that needs our help. And of course, if there's any questions here, I'd be happy to take those now.
Thank you, Craig. So again, just kind of wrapping up, we will have this presentation posted at conservenorthtexas.org. We'll also send it out to everybody who actually logged in today as a PDF slide deck. And so all links will be clickable. And of course, all of our team's contact information in terms of our energy efficiency, renewable energy folks, the team that works on that. We have a new email address, so you can get to all of us in one easy way instead of keeping up with a bunch of different email addresses. If you just send us a message at energy@nctcog.org, that will come to all of the people who you see here on the slide. So with that, I'd like to open it up to questions. If there's any questions, we can either take them via the chat. That is what we will do. We will take them via the chat. If you'll just type in questions for any of our presenters, we have plenty of time to field Q&A today. I would also encourage everybody, when we send the slide deck out, to please pass it along to your purchasing manager from your organization. A lot of this information is very relevant to them. Hopefully some are able to attend today. But for those of you who are representing groups without a purchasing manager online, please share. I will pose a question to Jen, and I am curious, with North Texas Innovation Alliance, of course, you just kind of officially launched here a couple months ago. And so based on some of the early conversations, do you have a sense of anything floating to the top in terms of a procurement priority? And I know you and I have chatted about the vision of kind of that one-stop shop of a place you can come and search for what you're looking for, and all of the cooperatives are in one. Amazing. So just curious if you have any thoughts on what some of those first activities might look like.
Sure, I'm happy to. So to your point, we haven't formalized, but what keeps bubbling to the top are things like infrastructure, particularly the heavy infrastructure projects, are something that obviously are overwhelming from a CapEx perspective, and how can that minimize trenching, all of the things that we know. And it's become even more clear over the last couple of years that a city's most valuable asset really is the light poles. So how do they incorporate both efficiency and management technology at scale? And that's something that obviously utility and Encore look at as well in collaborative forms. So I would say the heavy infrastructure projects are a high priority. Certainly issues that COVID has raised really strongly, which relate to things like fiber, have made those infrastructure, like comprehensive infrastructure conversations, even more pressing. I would say too, transportation and public safety always. And so, as we look at, I'm trying to think how to bubble it down, but public safety and transportation, some of it is about looking at transportation and demand response. There is talk about continued move toward electrification as another area. And then overall, when they think about the foundational platforms for data that manage everything and internal process improvement, those are really big ones. And in large part with the management software and things, there's so much differentiation between technologies often, and because there's less familiarity or precedent with those, just the education and the discussions amongst each other on what the best course forward is a big area as well.
Thank you. Jared, for you, one of the other things that you mentioned that jumped out to me was the utility bill processing contract. And because I can see some of the names of the people who are on the webinar, I know that some of those folks are involved in having to submit those reports to SECO every year that kind of compile how much electricity consumption, and the idea of having to pull all of the data out of utility bills has been it's been a talking point for us with many of our local governments over the past year or two, just unraveling what assistance there could be. So could you talk a little bit more about that contract, and is that contract in particular something that would be helpful in local governments being able to get assistance?
So I think
electricity consumption information.
Yeah, happy to talk about that. That's this is a contract that the current contract's been in place for about 18 months now, and it replaced a previous utility invoice processing service. And as I'd mentioned, the major agencies that are using it are right now are agencies that have a lot of distributed property and meters around the state. And with the with the fact that, and I think a lot of your area probably has got competitive market for supplying electricity, and that if you're finding overlap, that may be something that where this contract would come into place. This is something that we did in conjunction with CECO, and I think that Eddie Trevino is maybe on the call as well, or Fred Yeber, and they may be able to weigh in as well at a different time, or contact them directly. But part of the goal on this was to help report or prepare the reports that go to CECO on behalf of those agencies, and that was certainly part of the conversation when we set that up completely. The contract is linked out of the presentation today, and that link goes across to the contract page on the Texas Smart Buy system, and there is a price sheet there for that discusses the price for the various tiers of meters that you have, and the other options, whether you're receiving EDI bills through electronic methods, or if it's paper bills, and the prices accordingly to that. And then there's optional pricing for that direct reporting out from the vendor to CECO's system.
Thank you. Eddie or Fred, if y'all are still on the line, is there anything you want to add?
If anybody's got any questions, our contract manager information is on that page as well, and so but I'm happy to put anybody in contact with them.
We do have a question that came through the chat on how does a company or an individual become a provider, quote unquote, of renewable energy consultation and related services that might be sought by government agencies. So this would be services, not necessarily product sales.
I think from the state level, I'll talk about that. Consulting is a difficult one at the state level. There's not authority under state statutes to establish statewide consulting contracts. That's something the legislature specifically took action on about 4 or 5 years ago to restrict the ability of statewide contracts. So if an entity is interested in establishing a state consulting contract, it's something they have to go out for their own individual RFP. I'm not sure at the local level if there's more flexibility there to do something under a perhaps under an MOU type scenario with multiple entities, but certainly at the state level, putting a one-size-fits-all contract for a consulting service is not an option at this time.
Thank you, Cragen. I don't know if North Texas Share has any provisions for consulting services.
We actually haven't got any specific provisions, but that's not to say it's something we could not do. There's really nothing that prevents us from procuring any particular service or good. And for that matter, too, every procurement that we do is subject to the 2 CFR 200 regulations. So even if an individual were using state funds or federal grant funds, they will be compliant with the share contract.
Great point. Thank you. And I will mention that 2 CFR 200 compliance is extremely important for federal funds. I mean, it's imperative for use of federal funds. So especially with all of the money that's flowing now with COVID and the CARES Act and things like that, if local governments are looking to make any sort of purchases or investments, making sure that you're looking at contracts that are 2 CFR 200 compliant is. Any other questions from folks? Feel free to chat in. Well, thank you so much again for spending time this morning learning about this topic. Thank you so much to our presenters, Jen, Jared, Daniel, Cragen. Really appreciate y'all's input. Really great content, and I hope the recording will be very useful for everybody. So thank you so much. Everybody have a good afternoon. Enjoy your lunch. And stay tuned for more information from COG by signing up on one of those email addresses or for one of those email lists. Have a good day.